Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. I'm very excited to start the new year talking to Tamara, who specialises and works with eating disorder patients in the dietetics industry. It is very interesting. As you know, I love this space and I'm always excited to be learning so much in this space. So to kick it all off once again, as we always do, Tamara, who are you and what is it that you were doing?
So my name's Tamara Parker. A lot of people just call me Tam. So I'm an eating disorder dietitian. I work in a couple of different places. So I work across the Gold Coast health industry. So I work in community health, helping people that have just come out of hospital or, very complex presentations in a lot of different areas. So not just eating disorders. And I also run my own private practice where I specialize in managing eating disorders called Nourishing Dietetics. So I think it's just something that I managed to fall into one day and haven't looked back since.
Amazing. I find it so interesting because there is not many people in this space, especially practicing with people with eating disorders. You said you fell into it. Why did you continue to go down this path?
Yeah, so my first job as a dietitian was in community health, and I had never wanted to work in community. I always wanted to work in a hospital. And the first job I managed to get just happened to be in community health. And very quickly I realized that a lot of the things that we're trained in as dietitians aren't the biggest things. So it's not about imparting knowledge and giving, dietary educations to lots of people. It's actually got a lot more to do with a person's mental health. And so I started by doing some additional training in like mindfulness and CBT, with the perspective of just helping people live their healthiest lives. And then the more I went into it, the more our position in community health also started seeing people with eating disorders. And so the more I learnt, and the more I just realised there was such a gap, such an area that as dietitians we're not well trained in, we don't have a lot of exposure to, and a lot of dietitians don't like working in the area. And I never pictured myself working in the eating disorder space. And then once I started, there was something about it. It's honestly, the most rewarding space I've ever worked in. It's great to watch someone grow and just watch them get their life actually back or have their life. It might not be back, it might be a completely new life, but being there to support someone along that journey is so rewarding. And I honestly just can't imagine not doing it anymore.
It's awesome. I take my hat off to you because, as I said, there's not many people in this space, and I thank you for all that you're doing. It is challenging. I know myself, my own journey, having to go through dietitians, psychologists, the whole team, it can be frustrating, and you're not always the most likable person in the room because sometimes things not many people want. How do you find and manage that? Because sometimes you are that person that's not giving the person the advice they want to hear.
Yeah. And I think it's so common. And do you know how many people come into my office or are so petrified before they meet me? The amount of times I've had like a message or a voice message from someone or an email going, I'm really, really nervous, or it takes them a few days to return my call when I get a referral. And I just, I don't mind being the person that's seen as the scary one or I think it's just a perception though, because once people come to a couple of sessions, they realize that, out of hospital, no one can force someone to eat. So we're actually only there to support them. And part of that is with food. So I think it's very much a perception that we're that person. And yes, a lot of people are absolutely petrified to come and see us, but I hope that most of my clients would agree that after a couple of sessions, they don't feel that way anymore. But I also pride myself on enjoying being a part of a team. And I think that if we're all working towards the same goal and the, person with the eating disorder or disordered eating, they're the leader. So we're just there to support them and each of us play our own role. And I think everyone has to play a part. And I think in every team, someone's got to be the one that makes some hard decisions. And sometimes that's me. But in my experience so far, whenever I've had to do that, people always look back and say thank you for it. So it's that sort of thing that keeps me going.
Yeah, for sure. I said that reward at the end, it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Do you find with your patients, specifically with people with eating disorders, that there is hope and that they do recover?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think anyone can work in this space if you don't have hope. Hope is so important. And I think it is our role as health professionals to hold space for that hope when the person might not have any. Recovery looks different for everyone. And I think that what one person might consider fully recovered compared to another person might be very different. And no one can compare their recovery journey to another person's recovery journey. You know, what recovery is to a person is completely defined by them and their team. So I fully believe in complete recovery. I believe it's a hard journey, and I believe that thoughts might still come up and there might still be issues, but I do believe people can have the tools and the skills to be able to manage to live a very full life with them. And I think it's one of those hard arguments, because some people say, you know, they might never feel fully recovered because they might have thoughts about, you know, eating certain foods or their body image. But I would argue that we all have those thoughts from time to time, but it's how we cope with them and how much they affect our lives that really matters. But recovery should be defined by the person going through it. And I wholeheartedly believe in absolute recovery. Otherwise, I would not work in this space. You know, I think if you don't believe in it, get out.
Yes, that's very true. Look at it from a dietitian's perspective. What is your role for someone that comes to you with an eating disorder?
Yeah, so I get asked this a lot, and it's such a hard thing to explain, but my role differs depending on who the rest of the team is and who is involved. But generally speaking, my role and how I would describe it to someone who's coming to see me for the first time is that first and foremost, I'm there to make sure that someone is nutritionally safe and getting the things in that they actually need to be able to function and live their best life. So that can take place in many ways, shapes, and forms. But first and foremost, my role is to support the person to be able to eat enough to nourish their body and be able to live their life to its fullest. That's it in a nutshell. What that encompasses is huge. But in a nutshell, it's being able to support someone to be able to meet their nutritional needs. Yeah.
Wow. So are you guided nutritionally by a government standard or by a process that you have to then give to that person with an eating disorder?
Yeah, it's really hard because as far as dietetics goes, it's not like, I guess, psychology where we have a defined CBTE or a certain treatment protocol. There's a lot of research being done at the moment to develop specific protocols for dietitians to use. But at this point in time, we don't actually have them. So the evidence tells us that we should provide, you know, evidence-based dietetic care in a supportive way that's unique to the client and to the team. And I think this is one of the things that makes working in the space quite confronting for some dietitians, because there is a lot of, I guess, improvisation and change that needs to happen against what we would normally prescribe. Depending on the person with an eating disorder, our government Australian Guide to Healthy Eating may or may not be relevant to that person. You know, they're very much developed based on a very small cohort of people. They're also quite old guidelines now as well. They're from 2013. So I don't tend to use them much. I don't like calorie counting or prescribing people a certain amount of nutrients. I tend to look to work out what that person wants and needs and guide them to meet their nutritional requirements that way. So I'm more focused on, you know, do they meet their needs, not only from a perspective of getting different food groups and vitamins and minerals, but also socially and culturally and things like that. So I never use a defined standard of what I would educate someone to have. And I think this is a really hard thing for a lot of my clients as well, because they will ask me, what is the appropriate portion? And while we can give guidance on what might be a generally considered appropriate portion, only a person can actually know what the right portion is for them and how much food is appropriate. So while I'm guided by a lot of our evidence, especially for someone who might need to be renourished, and I will use those sorts of principles and foundations, it's all completely individualized. And I'm a big fan of completely individualizing it. So I don't like standardized meal plans. I don't like calorie targets. Yeah, I'm all about that food freedom.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
a space, especially finding out who you are and what you like, what you don't like.
Yeah.
Some struggling with an eating disorder though, when they're going through recovery and they have no idea. I remember going through my recovery and having no idea. I'm like, someone just tell me what I have to eat and the right size and the right portion, the right type of exercise.
Yeah.
How do you send that message to them when they just want to know, like, just tell me what to do?
I know. And you know what? There is a point in time in a lot of people's recovery when they might need a plan, and they might need something that, you know, I in the background will say, what are you safe to eat right now? Let's make a plan based on that. And the idea at that stage is to maybe take off some of the pressure of having to make those decisions. And so there is a time and a place for a plan like that, where I would do some calculations and work out how much nutrition is that person going to need to be able to stay, you know, medically stable, while they feel more comfortable and ready to move forward. So the first thing we do work on is that regularity and adequacy with their diet. So I often start with just saying to someone, you have to eat every 3 hours. I don't care how much you have or what you have, but every 3 hours you have to have something. And a lot of people get taken aback by that, because they'll try and challenge me or think they're challenging me by saying, I'll just have, you know, one of this. And I'll go, that's okay. But in 3 hours, you'll do it again. But it works really well, because the more we do that, the more we get used to it, and then we can build from there. But the amount of people that just go, just tell me what to eat. And I say, I'm happy to do that for now, and we'll come up with a plan together. But every session we're going to negotiate, and the person needs to eventually take ownership of their choices. But there is absolutely a time where it's impossible for people to do that. Or in the case of, I see a lot of adolescents as well, where the parents just need a plan on how we move forward. And if that's what's needed to keep someone safe, absolutely a plan will be given, and then modified into the future.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting advice, considering like talking to a lot of people and going through their recovery, and it's so much about plans and standardizing the way that their recovery is, and then all of a sudden that all goes, because now they've got to go back out into the real world, and that's when I have wow.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, because a lot of people come out of hospital and they've, you know, in hospital, food is presented to you. It's, you know, prepared for you. You don't have to prepare it. You don't have to shop for it. But when someone goes home and they're expected to eat that quantity and variety of food, it's a full-time job. And, you know, you've also then got all of your other commitments like study or work or family, friends, anything going on, even just walking the dog, you know. So then adding in this strict plan can be so hard. And I see so many people who feel like they're doing well, and they can get to a point where they might be weight restored, but then they're given nothing moving forward, or they're given a plan that is completely unrealistic. And I think the thing is, we've got a lot of evidence on how we nutritionally support someone while they're in hospital. We don't have much information on how we best support them when they go home, which is why I do tailor it. And I know there are plenty of dietitians that don't necessarily agree with my approach, but the way I find, if I give someone some massive plan that they find overwhelming, they're just not going to come back and see me. There's no relationship built. There's no ability to improve on their eating. Whereas if we can start and build up together, we develop that trust and that relationship that can keep working. You know, no one recovers from an eating disorder while they're in hospital. You recover once you get home. So it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of good work, but it has to start in a flexible way, I think.
Yeah. How do you think that transition is at the moment, coming out of hospital and then entering back into the real world? Do you think there is a clear pathway there?
Oh my gosh, no. I have many opinions on this matter. It is so hard for people coming out of hospital. And so I work on the Gold Coast, and, you know, for us, unless you have private health insurance on the Gold Coast, there is no day program here that's publicly funded. There's not, you know, I mean, there's a lot of support, but there's not a lot of resources day to day. And the wait times. So, I mean, as a dietitians, we've never really been that popular. Usually people can get in to see us, you know, whenever they want to. Yeah. But all of us, we now have very long wait lists. Psychologists have even longer wait lists, psychiatrists even longer again. And so a person can have their first presentation or their second, third presentation to hospital and still not have a team to connect with once they leave hospital. And then inevitably they end up back in hospital and they start to lose faith in the system. So by the time I see some people, they may have had a few admissions, a few negative experiences, and they've really lost a lot of hope. So that's where it gets back to having that hope and always having that, perpetual optimism for me. But there is such a gap, and, I like to work a little bit differently in my scope as a dietitian. If someone needs to practice going and doing grocery shopping, I'll go and do that with them because that's a part of their nutrition. If someone wants to practice having a coffee, I will have a coffee. We'll go to the cafe, we'll eat lunch together. I schedule certain people's appointments always over lunch so that we do eat together, because that's the support that once you leave hospital is lacking. You get this constant supervision and assistance at meals or after meals to stop you engaging in compensatory mechanisms. And then when you go home, for a lot of people, they're on their own. Not everyone has a family there that's looking after them or supporting them. Some of these people are mothers and fathers. So, they're then becoming someone who's looking after another person. So I like to try and do what I can to fill that gap. But I think, like everyone who works in this space, we all wish we could do more. But there's such a big gap, especially if you don't have private health insurance. And that's a real privilege to have that.
Yeah. Oh, I could be here for hours talking about the system, I swear.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so
and even in our public health role. So I work for Queensland Health and, I'm in community health, but this isn't an eating disorder role. We just see people with eating disorders because they weren't able to fit into anyone else's workload. So, we do it, and I'm very grateful that we do. But our service is also very short-term and time limited. So it's such a shame because I think there needs to be more people in the space and more being done. And I think it is. But unfortunately, the people suffering now aren't benefiting. The people in 10 years might, but those there right now, they need more help now.
Yeah. So what support and access can you get if you do have private health?
Yeah, so private health, mainly that supports you for the idea of an inpatient admission. It doesn't really do much for outpatients. If you have extras cover, it can give you a certain amount back on certain sessions. But honestly, for most people, the Medicare rebates that are available under an eating disorder plan are the better way to go for that anyway. But if you do have an appropriate level of private health cover, there are private hospitals that have eating disorder programs. So that can encompass both inpatient and outpatient programs. So the outpatient programs, I believe you're admitted as a day patient, and so it's covered by your private health insurance. However, you do still need to pay an out-of-pocket excess. I don't work in any of those day programs or inpatient programs, but a lot of my clients do attend them, and they speak very highly of the support that they get and the things that they learn. It's just hard to go from, seeing someone and having that support 24/7 to then maybe seeing someone once a week.
Yeah. And so you get referrals then from people, whether they're private or they're public, in the hospital, and then they come to you?
Yeah, so I see people from everywhere. So because I work across both the public sector and then also in my private practice, I get referrals from all sorts of places. So I get them from, public hospitals, I get them from private hospitals, I get them from GPs. I get lots of word of mouth referrals and people just touching base because a friend's seen me or a friend of a friend. Or, mums at school talk, and that's how they get my contact details. But I get referrals from quite a few different places. And because I do virtual support as well, I get some referrals from interstate. So, there's a bit going on, but it's fun.
What do you think needs to happen to fill this gap so there is an easier transition and more people can get help?
Yeah, I do think the things that are being done, with a lot more research being done into managing eating disorders once we've left hospital, I think that's going to fill a very big gap and justify some of the things that we need. I think, unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic and the increase in eating disorder presentations or people with increasing behaviours who already had eating disorders, I think there's just so much pressure on the system. I really do think that every city should have its own publicly funded day program. Like, I really think, especially on the Gold Coast, I think we could definitely use one. And I do agree with the idea that there should be more eating disorder specific wards where people are trained and managing all of that instead of just being on generic wards. I think that would fill the gap. I also believe that in terms of the Medicare rebates, I do think that they should be increased. So for dietitians, the amount that someone gets back for seeing a dietitian is quite small, and even though the psychologist rebate is also small, it's quite significantly higher than a dietitian's rebate. And so a lot of people have to choose one or the other of who they can afford to see. And our rebates are based on a dietitian seeing someone for 20 minutes. And I would never do a 20-minute appointment. That would be a disservice to any person to do a 20-minute appointment. But our rebates are based on it being only a 20-minute appointment. So there is a gap fee, and I think it becomes very costly for someone, and it is a privilege to be able to access treatment. And unfortunately, it's a privilege that not everyone can afford. And something that as health professionals, we also can't afford to not do that. So it's such a hard thing. I do believe that the Medicare rebate does need to be increased, and that my goal is that there'd be more day programs available to people.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that there is, as you said, there is an increase in people showing symptoms or behaviours of eating disorders? Why do you think that is?
Multifactorial. I think that the stress of lockdowns, the stress of a global pandemic, I think has increased people's need for different coping mechanisms. I also think the likelihood of trauma occurring over the past couple of years, whether that be family or domestic abuse, or job loss, not being able to see family or travel. I mean, they're all very traumatic events, each and every one of them. And so we do know that there's such a link between trauma and the development of an eating disorder. So I do believe that's going to play a trigger. And also just the lack of control in our lives over the last couple of years. I feel very lucky that I'm considered an essential worker as a healthcare worker, but not many people are in my position. And the amount of things that people have been going through that they have no control over. And, I know one thing that all eating disorders have in common is that it's there to give people a false sense of control and security. And I think a lot of people have, latched onto that in this period of time. We know that the biggest increase has actually been in binge eating disorder. And I do think that's also showing that there's been an increase in people needing a coping mechanism and not being able to access other coping mechanisms. So binging in itself, eating a large amount of food and that loss of control, in terms of coping mechanisms, it might be considered a safer alternative to, say, drug use or excessive alcohol, or gambling and things like that. And so I think one thing that was available throughout the pandemic was food, and a lot of us were prone to hoarding certain amounts of food, which I do also think drove a lot of that binge eating behaviour. So I do believe that there's been an increase in that. Unfortunately, the increase in referrals that I've seen have been more for restrictive eating disorders, as opposed to straight binge eating disorder. And I think that just highlights the stigma around that and the lack of people getting support for binge eating disorder, even though we know that's had the greatest increase over the last couple of years. But I think that's very reflective of what most of us see when we see people with eating disorders, because it takes a while longer for someone with binge eating disorder to feel like it's worthwhile seeking support.
Yeah. Do you treat, obviously you said you treat all eating disorder patients differently, but for someone that is going through a restriction to someone that may be purging or binging, they have different models to their treatment?
They can. It really depends a lot with the type of, I like to align how I approach the nutrition side of things with if they're receiving a certain type of therapy. So different types of therapy are more suited to different kinds of eating disorders. So if someone is linked with a psychologist and completing, a certain kind of therapy, I might change how I work slightly. But at the base of it, every single eating disorder person, the first step is learning to eat regularly and, manage the distress tolerance about how often we eat. And so that is what I work on with everyone to begin with, regardless of the type of eating disorder they have, pretty much regardless of whatever someone's coming to see me for. If someone's not able to eat regularly, we're not able to address any issues. So that's our first and foremost step, and that is with all eating disorders across the board. Until we have that regularity and that ability to sit in that discomfort, we can't move forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. And even talking about that discomfort and that guilt that can be associated with food, what do you offer to help support that person? Because I know that is a big thing for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh, it's so huge. It's so hard. And look, I empathize with every person that has had or has an eating disorder, because that distress, I mean, you know, we all have certain fears. I'm petrified of spiders. And honestly, when I see a spider in my house, I'm standing on a chair, pretty much crying in a corner. Yeah. And I try and remind myself sometimes that that's what my clients have to go through 6 times a day when they come across food, because, you know, my heart rate goes up, I get stressed, I get sad, I like say things to myself about how ridiculous it is that I'm scared of this spider, but I'm petrified of it at the same time. And I just think this is what my clients go through all the time. And I have such vivid memories of every time I've had a spider in my house in the last year, because it sticks with me so much. So I'm sure the distress is like that for my clients. Look, I really do believe that we can't move through that until we manage sitting in it. And that sitting in it is so uncomfortable for a person or anyone supporting someone with an eating disorder. I'm there, and I see my role as being honest about that discomfort. I tell no one that this is going to be easy. I say how uncomfortable it's going to be. We talk about what side effects to expect. So, you know, if someone's resuming eating regularly, we talk about how bloated they're going to feel. We talk about things like reflux. We plan for all the side effects that are likely to happen and are normal in the refeeding process, so that when they happen, the person doesn't feel like something's wrong. And we talk about strategies that work for them. So I'm a really big fan of DBT skills. And so, you know, whether that goes into if the person's only ready for distraction, we work out a plan for distraction. I do meal support with clients, and a lot of that is then what we do afterwards with sitting with the discomfort, naming it. So, and identifying the feeling that's associated with that, the fears that might be coming up, the self-talk, and we try and redirect that. I do also offer like virtual meal support with my clients. So, you know, that might literally just be having someone sit there, and we might just sit on a virtual chat over Zoom or something like that, and eat a meal. And it's just that little bit of a distraction and normalization, because a lot of people don't have someone else to help them through that process. So just having someone there that goes, I can see how hard this is, but keep going. Yeah. You know, I'm here, keep going. A lot of people just like to know that they're not alone. And I take that back to, if someone's there with me with that spider, I feel a lot more comfortable, because I'm not the only one who's got to keep an eye on it. So, you know, fears are better when tackled together. Yeah. And, you know, I'm there to help my clients tackle them.
So it's so refreshing to actually hear. And even the different approach that you take, it's so refreshing to hear that, because that support is so necessary. And to hear it from a dietitian as well, I feel that's incredible in itself, because as you said, like, you're in a medical field that has a specific approach, and you're changing the way that it's approaching eating disorders when you kind of going a certain way.
Well, and that's the thing, like, if something doesn't work, why do we keep trying it? Yeah. And every person is individual. We would never, you know, a doctor would never prescribe the same medication for someone if they presented with different symptoms. So we've got to really look at the person and work out what they need. And I think sometimes in eating disorder recovery, it is the practical stuff that's missing. So that actual skill of doing it. And, you know, I love the saying that eating disorders, it's not about the food, but it is about the food. Because 100% it's not about the food, but it is about the food. And there is no way out of it without eating. And we can talk about eating all we like, but until we do it, we don't get better at it. Yeah. All right. Until I learn to catch that spider and put it outside, I'm going to continue to be petrified of it. So, you know, it's a work in progress, and some of us get quicker at it and some of us don't. But look, I have hope for everyone that there's a better way forward than living with that eating disorder. So it's just about finding the right way for that person.
Yeah. As a dietitian, do you struggle to fight the diet culture and that whole diet industry that's pushing a certain standard on people?
Oh my gosh, it drives me nuts. It's horrible. It's so bad, right?
Yeah.
Look, none of us are immune to diet culture. None of us. But working in this space, I find that, especially for me, instead of buying into it, it just gets me mad. I have been known to, like, I'm the person that will write to a company and say, this is not okay. And just gym culture as well. I love certain types of exercise, but I hate gym culture.
Yeah.
And I work to really change that. So I feel like I go out of my way not to wear matching clothing to the gym, just because I don't want to perpetuate this idea that we have to do that. And, you know, I have tattoos, I have colored hair. I really try and go against the norm. And I feel like that's me rebelling against society telling me that as a dietitian, I have to look a certain way. So yeah, diet culture. And look, everything I do in all of my roles in, you know, helping people with chronic diseases, intolerances, and eating disorders, I encourage people to approach it with curiosity and acknowledge what they're seeing, acknowledge what they're reading, and look back and sort of helicopter see how it makes them feel. And if something is making you feel bad about yourself, or shame or guilt, evaluate, is it worthwhile and is it doing something for you? And I do that across the board, no matter what someone is worried about, because diet culture is not immune to eating disorders. You know, a person with diabetes is affected by diet culture because there's that, you know, perception that they have a certain body type and look and things like that. Clients that have had a heart attack, there's this perception that they might be lazy, unhealthy people that eat fast food. And so many of them don't, but they have that shame and guilt because of diet culture. It's something that we all need to be talking about. And I think it is all of our roles as health professionals to acknowledge that it's there. And I mean, diet culture exists in so many offices as well. Like, I can only imagine how many, because my clients tell me, how many of them have come to an appointment and there's not been a chair that they can comfortably sit in. And that's ridiculous. If you can't even see your health professional without being comfortable in the chair that you're sitting in to talk to them, you know, how are you going to actually get anywhere? Diet culture comes up in so many ways in our life, and it's the smallest things that we can do, like making an environment comfortable, calling it out when we see it in our colleagues and our friends and our family. It's all of those little things that I think any of us who have the ability to should be doing it.
I get so frustrated, especially with the people that talk about like just wanting to eat healthily or eating clean, and it's just like, can't eat this, can't eat that, and it's just like, you don't understand the impact you're having when, you know, a child could be listening or someone around that absorbs that. We normalize that conversation, and it shouldn't be normal.
Absolutely. No. And I think, you know, I get it a lot as a dietitian. I'm a baker. I live to bake. Like, I love it. You know, it's Christmas time. I've made, you know, gingerbread houses, all of that sort of stuff. I love it. It excites me so much. It's the science of food. You know, I'm a real nerd, so cooking really hits well with me. The amount of times that I will bake something and bring it to an event or, you know, a work scenario or something, and I'll have people go, oh, the dietitian made it, so it must be calorie free. And I call people out every single time and go, maybe let's not talk about calories, because it's not relevant how many calories this has in it. It's an expression of, you know, something I enjoyed doing. And you can choose whether you eat this or not. You actually don't have to. Yeah. But if you would like to, please go ahead. Yeah. And then I get the other end of the stick where I have people, they'll come and bring food around, and then they'll go, oh, you won't want this, you're the dietitian. And I just go, oh my gosh, I'm a dietitian. I still have taste buds. They didn't disappear the day they handed me my degree. And I'm really, really lucky because the places where I work are very open to this. I've done talks on weight stigma, on, you know, diet culture, eating disorders. So my team that I work with are so on board, and they call themselves out now, and it's fabulous. You know, I did a talk on weight stigma and about not praising weight loss, or anything like that. And, you know, I had a really good discussion from some of the nurses going, but what if someone, you know, did it on purpose? And I said, well, what if they did? You know, we don't know how they did it. And we also don't know if that weight is going to stay off, because statistically speaking, it's not. So how does that make that person feel when the weight comes back on? And they went, oh my gosh. And I went, yeah, right. And they are now so mindful. And the amount of compliments our staff now give each other that are non-appearance related compliments, it's wonderful, because when you compliment someone's personality or the work that they've done, that can't be taken away. Whereas appearance related compliments, I mean, they have a shelf life, don't they? And they're not worth that much. But telling someone that you appreciate their, you know, bubbly personality, that you look forward to when you have lunch together, that you know, appreciate that thing that they did for you, that holds true with someone, and someone's going to remember that more than they're going to remember, oh, I like that dress on you.
Yeah, personality compliments go such a long way. I find like physical compliments, you kind of obsess over them for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Yep. Like, do they really think I was good in that dress, or were they actually just like trying to be nice? Like, you obsess over it more.
Exactly. And I find a lot of people, and I do this as well, so by no means am I immune to this, but people will say, oh, I really like that. And I'll be like, oh, thanks, it's from Kmart. I only paid $10 for it. And I feel like I sometimes have to justify when someone gives me a compliment. And I think that's a lot of us, you know, we struggle with accepting compliments. Whereas if someone says, oh, you know, I really appreciated the way you did this, I can't really be like, oh no, that wasn't me. Because it was me. You know, I think we're more inclined to accept a compliment when it's actually about our values and who we are as a person, because we know that to be true. Whereas appearance related concerns, we have that other voice that tells us otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's great to hear that it's being more accepted as well in the medical field.
Yeah.
Even nurses and that are being more mindful. Like, that's incredible.
Oh, it's so incredible. It's so rewarding. And look, it takes a long time, but I just want to say, if there's anyone out there that's a health professional, you know, doing the same work, keep it up, because you do notice the changes in time, and it's so worthwhile. Because even if that one other health professional spreads that to one other person or impacts one person's life, they can then do the same, and it just has that flow on effect. It's so important.
Yeah. Do you feel that there are more people being interested in eating disorders and studying it and wanting to come through?
Yeah. I think I do believe, because of COVID as well, I do think there are a lot more people acknowledging it. It can be hard to answer that sometimes, because I'm so involved in this world on so many levels that sometimes I become blind to the fact that some people don't know that there are other eating disorders, you know, other than anorexia nervosa, and things like that. But I really do think, because when I talk to people about it now who, you know, don't know what I do or aren't familiar with a lot of my work, there is a lot more that's being said and heard of, and a lot more resources, you know, that are available. So when people actually go looking for information, there is information there to find now. And I don't think there was a few years ago. So I do think more is being done. And there's a lot of funding for research and things like that. And I do believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see, you know, improved healthcare. But I also think that as we raise the awareness and reduce the stigma, more people are going to seek help. And we know that at the moment, only a quarter of people with eating disorders seek help. So if we know they're on the rise, if everyone actually starts accessing help, even if we increase our workforce, we can't meet demand. Yeah. So, you know, the more awareness is likely to mean more people seek help, which means we're going to need more people working in the area anyway. It's getting there, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, is like, you want to be more aware and you want to get people to access help. Once again, those wait lists come involved, and as well as people coming through to and wanting to be trained in this area to become eating disorder practitioners. Are you aware that they are?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I remember when I started in this space, and you know, I didn't feel like there was many of us there. You know, people were I guess, avoiding the area at all costs. And then as I've gone through it, I've met some wonderful health professionals, and there are a lot of up and coming. I think it's just an area that you can't enter into it without a lot of support and supervision and guidance, because it is, you know, such an area that is new, especially for dietitians to take such a big role in, that, you know, you've got to be able to talk that through. And because every person with an eating disorder is different, and there's so many psychological skills that you have to be aware of and know, that I think a lot of newer dietitians can struggle with that. I know that there are a lot of dietitians coming through. I'm so excited that next year I'll be able to expand my practice and actually start working with a few of them. I think they're there, but they've got to be given the opportunity and the support to become the best kind of clinicians that they can be. So I'm a very big believer in training and support, and I do mentor a couple of newer dietitians, because I think, you know, once we have the confidence and ability, we need to be imparting that ability on to other people. And also, not everyone is going to fit with me. So it's important that I know who else is working in this space, because if someone I know doesn't quite, you know, fit with me, or, you know, I hear their story and I think, hey, you know what, I think you'd be better suited to this other person, I want to be able to offer someone the best therapeutic alliance they can possibly have. I mean, if you see a doctor and you don't like them, you don't give up doctors, you just go find a new one. Unfortunately, with dietitians, there's not many of us. So if you see me and you don't like me, oh my gosh, your options are pretty limited. So I like to know who's working in the space, and I don't see it as an area where, you know, we don't have to be competitors or worrying about that sort of stuff. We all work together to provide the best care that we possibly can. And I think that's really, really important, because, you know, how I work isn't going to work for everyone, and I'm happy to tailor what I do, but I'm also not offended if someone feels that they might be suited better to someone else. You know, the same way I know I don't want to see every health professional.
No, that's amazing. And honestly, what you're doing is incredible. I want to kick it off lastly with just some top tips and advice. Firstly, for a person that could be experiencing an eating disorder, what should they do if they know that, you know, they are seeing symptoms, or they're just a bit concerned about some areas where they may be restricting or binging? What is the first thing that they should do?
So first things first, see a medical professional. You know, it can be really hard to take that step and actually go to someone and say, you know, I think I might have a problem. So sometimes looking up some information from, you know, the Butterfly Foundation, or, you know, the National Eating Disorders Collaboration, and even looking through some of their work, their sheets, and seeing what you think you might have, print off a copy and go to your doctor if you're not comfortable talking about it. All eating disorders have physical side effects, and they can all affect our medical health. So they are psychiatric conditions with physical side effects. And so we all need to be managed by a doctor to be able to be safe. The first thing anyone can do is just talk to someone. If you don't feel comfortable talking to a doctor, a trusted friend or family member, someone along those lines who might be able to go with you and support you through that initial appointment, that is necessary for everyone. And if you see a doctor that you're not comfortable with, you know, if they make a comment on your weight or tell you that you don't meet a criteria based on, you know, I won't even get into the BMI because that's a whole nother conversation. But if they base your health on that number, I would leave and go to another doctor. You need someone who's going to listen to your concerns and really take them seriously. And don't give up. If you see someone who doesn't take your concerns, you know, as seriously as you would like, try again, because I promise you there's a doctor out there that is going to take you seriously. And just because someone doesn't think it's serious doesn't mean it isn't. Please know that. And if you are questioning whether you have an issue, you don't need to wait to get help. You are worthy of support and worthy of getting help. If you think you might need it, please talk to an eating disorder professional. You know, GP is a great place to start, but if you do feel more comfortable reaching out to a psychologist or a dietitian that you've seen or heard of, you can always do that as well. And we can then see you and then write to your doctor if you do have a concern. But I think the biggest tip, just don't stay quiet. This is going to be the fight of your life. And no one should do that fight by themselves.
Oh, Amazing advice. And what should people do as well when they are stuck on those wait lists? Should they be doing something in addition while they are waiting to get an appointment or seeking elsewhere?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. And I feel for everyone on a wait list waiting for something, or are only able to see one professional while they're waiting to see another one. You know, things that you can do are to, you know, find a few good support services, things like podcasts like this, videos, you know, social media and that sort of stuff. There's a lot out there nowadays. So giving yourself information, arming yourself with positivity, you know, hearing stories of hope, so important. Online support services. So there are a lot more nowadays. Places like the Butterfly Foundation have, you know, chat messages, emails, phone lines, all of those sorts of things. So utilizing all of those in the meantime, and seeing your GP as much as you need to. I have clients that see their GP twice a week because your GP is there, and they are able to provide that support as well if you've got a good GP. In terms of your nutrition, if you are worried, you know, try and get back if you can to that rule of threes. You know, try and have something every 3 hours. If you're comfortable, make it 3 meals, make it 3 snacks. If the idea of calling something a meal is confronting, just think of it as every 3 hours an occasion of eating. If you can start with that foundation, you're well on the way to regulating your body's normal functioning. And that's a really important thing. So doing that, and just practicing self-kindness to yourself while you are on those wait lists. You don't need to wait until you become sicker or you feel sicker. You can get those intermediate supports in the meantime. And I think I would just say as well, you don't have to delay recovery until you do see a psychologist or a psychiatrist and things like that. You know, if there are things that you feel ready to do now, such as starting to eat or challenge those thoughts or get into any professional, if you can see a dietitian first, do that. You know, you don't have to wait until you've got your whole team there before you take that first step.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And I just want to say, as we do wrap up, thank you so much for everything that you are doing. It is so, as I said, refreshing to hear there's someone so passionate in this space that is pushing for change, and you are making change. It is phenomenal. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all your clients and the community do as well, because what you're doing is changing lives and really shaping this space, and so grateful for what you are doing. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate, you know, all the hard work that everyone recovering from an eating disorder puts in. You know, I can only be there to support someone. Everyone does such an amazing job. I'm in awe of everyone fighting an eating disorder. And I'm just so grateful to be along for the journey.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal journey, and it's a very rewarding one if you find your team and you can come out the other side. And you
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone out there, for tuning in for another Secret Sunday session. It was phenomenal to talk all things eating disorders in a positive light as well, knowing that there is hope, there is amazing support out there that you can access. Lastly, where can people find you, Tamara, so that they can potentially get in touch or just listen out?
Yeah. So people can find me on Instagram and Facebook just at Nourishing Dietetics. I work on the Gold Coast at my private practice, Nourishing Dietetics. So people can search that online. I've got a blog on there, and, you know, I'm a bit quiet on social media at the moment, but I'm usually a little bit more active. But people can always get in touch through that and check out little videos and things that I pop up just to remind people that there is hope, and hopefully see you all there.
Yes, it's phenomenal. And no, as I said, there is services out there. So you can contact the Butterfly Foundation or Nourishing Dietetics on social media, and then also here at the Secret Button for anyone that needs support out there. But no, there is support and there is hope. Thank you once again, and everyone have a great Sunday afternoon. We'll catch you next time.